Hey, this is Gaz Whelan from the Happy Mondays. You're listening to The Vinyl Guide, one of the best podcasts out of Australia, because I knew about it before this. I was thrilled to come on. I didn't know, yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Groove Washer, the best record cleaners and protective sleeves for your vinyl collection. Ask for the Groove Washer from your local shop or go to groovewasher.com. Discount code VinylGuide10. And now, on with the show.
People of Earth, welcome to episode 415 of The Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. And this week, we are so stoked. We've got Gaz Whelan of Happy Mondays here on the show. He's such a nice, charming guy, full of fun stories about Manchester, Northern Soul, the Hacienda, Factory Records, Noel Gallagher, and more. Plus, I found out Gaz is a fan of The Vinyl Guide, which always trips me out when I hear that. I'm very flattered and humbled by that when musicians who've gotten into my ears tell me that the podcast has gotten into theirs. That's pretty incredible to me. Anyway, today Gaz shares lots of great stories and also wants to let the Aussies and Kiwis know that Happy Mondays are on their way down under the latter half of October. The 24-hour Party People Greatest Hits Tour, Auckland, Brisbane, Sydney, 2 Melbourne dates, one of which is sold out, Adelaide and Perth. Tickets are available at the usual spots, or you can go to destroyalllines.com and secure your spot before they sell out. Now, also to let you know, there is an extended version of this interview available only to show patrons at patreon.com/vinylguide. Head over there now. You could help support this show, sponsor me for a burrito and a beer each month, keeps me putting out these episodes, and you get access to extra stuff. Commercial-free interviews, high-resolution audio files, and just like today, an extended interview with Gaz. It's all up there at patreon.com/vinylguide. Help support the show and get all the extras. And finally, if you're new to the Vinyl Guide podcast, we want to welcome you and encourage you to follow us for free in your podcast app of choice. Apple, Spotify, Overcast, Amazon, Google Podcasts, and more. We're up on them all. It's all free, and there's over 400 other episodes available to enjoy anytime. I don't put up a paywall. I don't only give you the latest episodes and charge you for the others. I'm happy to share these episodes for as long as the internet lets me. Episodes like 412 with Peter Hook talking about the rare records of Joy Division. That's episode 412 of the Vinyl Guide. Sixto Sugarman Rodriguez, Rest in Peace, episode 408. Jody Stevens, A Big Star, episode 405. Billy Bob Thornton and J.D. Andrew of the Boxmasters, episode 403. Perry Farrell and Eric Avery of Jane's Addiction, episode 387. Steve Turner of Mudhoney, episode 384. Chris Shiflett of Foo Fighters, episode 382, and lots more. Follow the Vinyl Guide in your podcast app and enjoy all of these and hundreds more anytime. And with that, let's ring up Mr. Gaz Whelan of Happy Mondays and ask him all sorts of record and music nerd questions. Gaz!
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
It must be late at night for you, no?
Oh, it's not too bad. Not too bad. Not too late. Well, hey, we're very excited about you guys coming down to Australia. Just in case anyone is unaware, Happy Mondays 2023 24-hour Party People Greatest Hits Tour. The month of October, you hit New Zealand, then Australia, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, and then even going to Fremantle. So you're kind of doing the whole loop.
Yeah. Where are you? Where are you now?
Sydney.
Where are you?
Sydney.
Oh, you're in. Yeah. I lived in not Fremantle, but I lived in Perth for 5 years.
Oh, I didn't realize it.
I've got 2 sons. My eldest son was born there.
So you this is definitely a victory lap for you. This is the first tour I think since Paul passed. So how's the band doing? How's the spirits of the group?
First and foremost, he's my best mate. He's my best friend. When I joined the band, when the band formed, I was only 15 and Paul was 18, so he's the closest to me. All the others are like 5 years older. Well, the city was Paul, Mark, and Sean were when we started. So me and Paul hit it off, and we were into similar music. We were both into the Bunnymen. He was into funk, I was into soul, so that was really connected on that. It's just difficult. It was just difficult. It's been weird on a band situation coming back from the shows, because Paul was an avid card-carrying smoker.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd have to stop every 30 minutes after the gig. So it's really after the shows, me and Mark looked at each other and gone, it's not the same stopping. We're not stopping every 30 minutes so Paul can have a cig and I can have a pee. That's the usual. And I miss him all the time. And you've seen the Paul Ryder podcast that are out. His wife's done.
Oh, no, I haven't. No, I'm not.
Well, 3 weeks, he was going to do a book, and he was living in California for 20 years. In fact, we lived with him for a year, 2 summers. And his ex-wife's a TV producer, so she's put down these interviews with him about his life story about the band. And they finished 3 weeks before he died. So they're on YouTube now, the Paul Ryder podcast. They're going down really well. I think Netflix might be picking them up. Because they've been really good, so he kind of gets his story across. So that's been helping to hear him, see him again. But it's a bit sad. It upsets me,
Well, I mean, you being the rhythm section, I mean, he's kind of your closest musical partner in the band too, yeah.
Well, I started off as I've got my thing here. This is what I do. This is my kind of job. I play acoustic guitar. So I'm a singer-songwriter, and that was at 11. I started playing guitar. And then I had a bad accident with my arm, nearly lost my arm, so I couldn't play music. And then this is a bit boring and going off track a little bit, but in 1979, Christmas Day, my brother-in-law was staying with us with my older sister, and the Christmas dinner got put back an hour, so I turned the TV on, and BBC Two was Beatles Day. And I never kind of taken this Beatles serious because I thought, kid a bit of a rebel, I thought, and it was 5 minutes into Hard Day's Night, and I just changed my life forever before even the music. And I saw Ringo was funny. I thought, maybe my arm can work a little bit. I'll pick drums up. So I bought a drum kit, and that was it. And it's because of the Beatles, because of Hard Day's Night, because of that Christmas Day.
So did you have a lot of records around the house as a kid? Yeah,
my mum and dad had, they were rock and roll freaks. They had a lot of, my dad was into gospel and Little Richard and Elvis and a massive Isaac Hayes fan. And loads of like the Staple Singers and all that kind of stuff. So it was all kind of gospel and stuff. And but he was a big Stones fan. He wasn't a Beatles fan, so it was always the Stones. So it wasn't until that day, and then I've become a Beatles obsessive ever since. Since that day, I was 13, 14 at the time, and that changed, that completely, like it did most people's lives. I know it's a really boring story of the Beatles, but it just did. It was something that was about something magical that grabbed me before I even heard the music. And it just dragged me in, and they were just 20 minutes down the road. Because we're from West Manchester, which is the nearest part to Liverpool, and so it's just literally 25 minutes down the road.
So at one point, I think Paul McCartney had commented on the Happy Mondays. Yeah. How did that? And as a super fan, that must have flipped you out.
It did. You know what I mean? I think with hindsight, I think he was just doing it to kind of be with it at the time, with the young bands down with the ones hands. Because I don't think you can compare us to the Beatles. Cry, God bless him. I think that's what he was doing. Very kind of him, but I don't think there's really, I think he was just, I think so. But it's still nice to hear.
Well, at least he knew of you. You were on his radar in some way.
Yeah, you know what? That's exactly what it was at the time. Just the fact that he mentioned us, and I've never met any of the Beatles. Paul Ryder met George Harrison because he was going out with Donovan's daughter. Went to George's house. So it was just crazy. George is kind of. I mean, I don't know if you're a Beatles fan or not. I don't know. I'm a massive Beatles fan, and you have I don't think you can really choose a favorite Beatle. You just have one who you can relate to, and it was always George for me. And he met him. So I've never met any of them, but yeah, to hear was on the radar. Exactly, that was
Mm-hmm. So early on, you said 1979 is when you saw the Beatles on Christmas. Okay,
I've checked it on Google. I've looked, and it was Beatles Day on BBC Two, 79. The timing was exact, so my memory hadn't played games with it. It was true, yeah.
And that's a couple years after the famous Sex Pistols gig in Manchester.
Yeah, I was too young. I was too young for that. That was that kind of that generation was 4 years older. I mean, Sean might have been out, and Mark might have been old enough for it, but it was just a little bit before my time. And by the time I'd got into, similar to me and Noel Gallagher, I think the same age, similar to Noel saying that by the time we got into punk, it was kind of almost over, 78. I come out of hospital in 77, 78, and it was Sex Pistols was my first album I had. My mum and dad bought it for me, came home. Yeah, so the first album I owned on vinyl was Never Mind the Bollocks. And they brought us a coming out present out of hospital. But I think they'd even split up by then,
So your parents, it sounds like they were into soul, Stax Records, I guess Northern Soul. Is that fair to say your parents were kind of into that scene?
Northern Soul was kind of more the rarer stuff.
Okay.
That's kind of more of the Northern Soul was really stuff on Motown and Stax that never got released, that was shelved. And these DJs had dug out these records that were never released or really, that never really got. There's a few big hits, but for the most part, it was unknown soul music.
And then when they got you, Never Mind the Bollocks, that's very different than some of the soul they're used to. Were they supportive of your musical adventures there? Yeah.
I can say as 12, I was 12-year-old rebel. I heard this music and I was like, what's that? Wow, and I just was into punk. And then it was ska music, the Specials in 78. That was kind of my first kind of movement for my age group when I was like 12, 13, because punk was just a little bit before it. And then that would I was listening to that was soul music. There was ska, and then there was the mod revival. That was kind of soul music. And then the Beatles thing just blew me socks off. And it's funny because even to this day, all these years on, I put Beatles on it, and it still blows my mind. It still blows my mind. I can't get my head. And I know it's the obvious one, and everyone says it, but there's something just really weird about them. It's like there's some sort of alchemy, and it wasn't just the music. And it's bizarre, I know it's predictable, but they're just amazing.
A couple years ago, they had that 6-hour video series on the Twickenham sessions and Let It Be. How amazing was that still survives, and we were able to see it so many years later?
I've watched it about 6 or 7 times. It's funny. I was in Toronto recently. There, and Noel Gallagher again. I was talking, and he said to me, "What did you get from that watching it?" And I said, "Well, a couple of things I got from it. I got from it that." They're really it's hard if you're not English to understand this, but kind of the really normal northern working class lads, which is very working class lads in the south are the same, but the north, especially northwest of England, Manchester, Liverpool, are very different than the rest of the country. They're very they're not very nationalistic. They're not very patriotic because they're next to Ireland and there's a lot of immigrants, and they seem very northern. They have a very similar sense of humour, Manchester and Liverpool. And also, I was really surprised how out of to use a phrase I don't really like, the Luke George Harrison was. Because obviously on tour, the four of them are very tight, but in the studio, it was very Paul and John, and Paul running the show. And I kind of knew that, but how shy and quiet George was, and he felt like he couldn't. I was really surprised at that. I thought he would. And I said to Noel Gallagher, what did you take from it? And he said, there was no guitar stands. You just put the guitars on the floor.
Yeah. I noticed that. Yeah, because you pick it up. I would like, you got to tune it again. You got to start. Yeah.
That's what he took from it, which I thought was quite funny. I thought it was going to be something quite deep and profound about it. And that's what his take from it was, there'd be no guitar stands.
So you missed the Sex Pistols show. Did you get a chance to see some of the earlier Manchester, the Joy Division and whatnot live? Were you able to see that?
That was before my time. That was before my time. It's like the older lads that I'm the youngest in the band. The older lads I missed them. I hadn't even heard of Joy Division. But when I joined the band in '82, when I was just at school, 15-year-old, Paul Ryder did me a tape, and it was Joy Division, and that's the first time I'd heard him. I'd never heard him before. So I got to see New Order, of course, and that, and got to see the Smiths and once. But no, not really. It was before my time.
Okay. When you joined the band, was it still called Something in the Attic, or was it Happy Laws or Happy Mondays?
We were called. It was called Avant Garde. Actually, it was never something. It was called Avant Garde. I think Paul had come up with it just because it was French. And then we changed. Echo and the Bunnymen brought a song out in '83 called The Cutter. And there's a part middle eight in the song. It says the breakdown where it says, "And by the happy loss." So we thought it said Happy Laws. It says Happy Loss, LOSS. So we called Happy Laws for a few days, and then we just changed to Mondays. And then a few months later, New Order brought Blue Monday out, and we was like, and everyone called us Blue Monday for a year by mistake, and it was too late. We kept it. That was pure coincidence.
So when playing music in Manchester, it must have been almost a natural reaction to try to get on the radar of factory records. Was that kind of the playbook the band was trying to follow?
I mean, the kind of band we were, no one was going to sign us. In fact, we had a London record, which is a major. I think they're part of maybe EMI or something. Came up to watch us rehearse. Funny enough, which is really strange. And they liked us, but they said you need an image. You want you to dress you up like. Culture Club or something, and we just went, no chance, forget it, absolutely no chance. So, and Paul Ryder was always wanted to factory with the band, the label, because they would just let you do what you want. So it was always our ambition, but we were not like factory bands. Factory bands were very, kind of that kind of melancholy, look at your feet, music. It was kind of dark. We didn't think that we would like us, So yeah, that was always the ambition. But luckily we had a new manager who was friends with Mike Pickering. He was an influence at Factory. So yeah,
there's that story of the Happy Mondays coming in last place at a show at the Hacienda. And prior to that, did you spend a lot of time at the Hacienda? What are your memories of that?
No, well, early on we went there. Paul and Sean took me one night, and it was really a student for students, and we're from kind of northwest Manchester, and South Manchester is kind of where all the students are, where all the bands were from. Northwest Manchester is kind of the industrial side. There's only New Order who were from there. No one else was from there, and the Fall, not many. It was all, and we went, and it was empty. It was a cavernous, cold, appalling acoustics. It was empty. It was student night on a Thursday. We went on, I think, a Wednesday night when it wasn't busy. We didn't nearly get in. We had to lie and say we were from South Manchester because the way we were dressed in you. And then some manager's going to call me. It was horrendous. It was awful. And they played, and they just played like indie music and music we didn't like. It wasn't. And then there was a DJ started playing Gil Scott-Heron and bits of American hip hop with and mixing it in, and that they did in New York. And it was great.
Okay, so Tony Wilson saw the band, decided to give it a shot, and I think the output of that was the 45 EP. Is that correct? Okay. Yeah, sorry. Tell me the story of making that EP.
We were just happy to make a record with Factory, and we weren't really bothered whether we were happy to do that, and then that would be it. And Mike Pickering was he had a band called Quando Quango at the time. He went on to form M People, of course, but he was a DJ at the Hacienda who was playing the hip hop stuff. So we were just happy to be with someone from Factory, and he didn't really do much. He wasn't really a producer at that time, but we were just thrilled to go in. Went to a new studio in Bury, which is like a satellite town outside of Manchester. It'd just be good to be in a pop studio paid for by somebody else. And it was kind of uneventful. We made 4 songs. One, we tried to sound like the bands at the time, which were very jingly jangly, which was kind of went against everything we believed in. I don't know why we did that. One song called Oasis, which is a bit trippier, which we liked. And then I can't remember what the other songs were, but Delightful was chosen because it was the easiest on the air. But it was an uneventful event. It really was.
Was that pretty much the 4 songs you had? Did you have much more material than that?
Yeah, we had some others, but that probably they were the easiest to do. That were in the most shape. We didn't really. Our writing involved just doing songs for live. We weren't writing for an album. We were just writing to play live. So most songs are 9 minutes long.
And that EP, I always read it as a bit of a test. Tony Wilson seeing how the band would perform before graduating to a full-length album. Is that kind of how it worked?
We'll be back after these messages. There's no doubt about it. Record collecting has become a serious hobby and even an investment for many around the world. So record collectors have to ask themselves how best to protect their prized records and confidently buy and sell with others. There is an option to consider: vintage media grading at vmgvinyl.com. vmgvinyl.com will professionally grade your record and encase it in protective plastic, so your record will retain its value for decades to come. This is the same approach that comic book and sports card collectors have done for years. Now, I know many record collectors will be horrified with the thought of having their records graded and encased in plastic. And for the majority of records, this isn't necessary. But if you have top dollar records that you need to protect, maybe a super rare album that's languishing on the shelf, a one-off misprint, or a special LP that you want to protect, look up vmgvinyl.com, Vintage Media Grading, and see if this service is right for you. That's Vintage Media Grading, vmgvinyl.com.
Hey everyone, I'm here to talk to you about Seems Easy record sleeve repair strips. Ever find a record in a used bin where the vinyl is gorgeous, but the sleeve has this ugly split and is even falling completely apart. Well, that's okay. Grab it anyway, because with Seams Easy record sleeve repair strips, you can fix that right up. Seams Easy record repair strips repair seam splits from the inside, so it doesn't affect the appearance of a record sleeve, but it does make it functional again. With Seams Easy, records can now slide in and out like new. Turn a $5 record into a $25 functioning collectible. Just ask your local record shop for Seams Easy strips, and if they're not in stock, go to seamseasy.com. That's Seams Easy with 2 Z's. Seams Easy record sleeve repair strips. Seems easy because it is. Oh, and hey, record nerds, don't forget to clean your records with the very best and safest record cleaner, the Groove Washer. Make your records look and sound their very best and store them with confidence using the new Groove Washer Groove Guard record sleeves. You gotta try this out. It makes a huge difference to the quality of your vinyl experience. Ask for the Groove Washer by name at your local record store and accept no substitutes. Or head over to groovewasher.com and use discount code VINYLGUIDE10.
All hail the Groove Washer.
That's groovewasher.com, discount code VINYLGUIDE10.
Now we return to the program, already in progress.
No limits.
It's a 45 EP. I always read it as a bit of a test. Tony Wilson seeing how the band would perform before graduating to a full-length album. Is that kind of how it worked?
It was a test, and it failed, I think, on every level. But for some reason, because Tony said, they're trying to sound like something that they know they should be. And out of curiosity, he said they're trying to sound poppy and like, the band that they're not. And I want to see this band that I'd heard live, and then he came to see us live, and that changed it. So it was out of his interest that we got a second shot at it. We got a second shot. Can't remember. We did another single. What was the next single after that? Yeah, did another single called Tart Tart, which was, he said, just be yourselves and don't worry about commercial or just do. And that's when he got it.
When did Freaky Dancing come in? Was that
maybe it might be Freaky Dancing, you're right. No, that was later. Freaky Dancing was later, was after that. He came down to you know what? Good point you make that. When he really got on board, he was in Strawberry Studios, a studio in Stockport, like 10cc Jews, and we were doing Freaky Dancing, which was about 5 a.m. in the morning. I mean, they wanted it really slow, and it was hard to play it really slow, and we weren't getting it. And we finally got it about 6 a.m., and Tony Wilson turned up at that time. I don't know if he was on his way to work early on, and he got it, and he said, "Oh, it's like amalgamation of funk and rock, and it's filthy. It's like the Velvet Underground meets Sly and the Family Stone," and we all went, "Yes, that's what we want." And he went, "I get it now." And that's when he changed and started really being, because the Factory Records, people didn't really like us. There was a girl who worked for him who liked us, and she was always fighting our cause, Tracy Donnelly. And then there was Tony, and Tony did after that. Tony stuck up for us. Well, we would have got a second bite. So, yeah.
Okay. And that, talking about the Velvet Underground, that must have been the connection that brought in John Cale. Is that how that worked?
Yeah, well, I've just been listening to Paul Ryder podcast. There's a different story on there, but I remember Phil Sachs, who was our manager, we were big Velvet Underground fans. Everyone was Lou Reed fans, but me and Phil Sachs, who was our manager at the time, were big John Cale fans. And John Cale was doing a tour at the time for his album Dying on the Vine, and we went to see him at the Hacienda. And afterwards, he mentioned it to Tony, why didn't you get him to produce? Because he'd done, and that's what I remember it being from. But people have other memories, But that's what I thought. Yeah, so me and Phil Sachs, the manager, were John Cale fans.
So again, yeah, you guys are big fans, and John Cale is now working with you. Was it, how did the band behave around John Cale? Did it change the band in any way?
It was weird because he didn't get us until we'd kind of found a feed. We met up in London, the studio, and he was going through he'd just give up smoking and drinking and everything. He had tangerines, clementines all the time, extra strong mints. And we were just getting started. So we were drinking, smoking, doing everything. So it was a real, it was bad timing. And so he just didn't get us. And he got us to record everything playing as a band for 3 days. And at the end of it, after the 3 days, he started to kind of understand. And he just said, scrap it, we're starting again. But he still didn't really, and his engineer was kind of from a real music background. And the engineer was saying, they have done what they're doing, are the geniuses. And we were neither, we were somewhere in between, probably more towards not knowing what we were doing. But he was saying, I remember him saying to me, the producer Dave Young, who we worked with, why are you playing them funk grooves really slow and sloppy? I said, one, that's the only way I can play them. Two, I don't want them to be too tight because we've just like white boys played funk and we don't want to sound like that. He said, so you're purposely dragging it and playing it. So I said, well, kind of, yeah. Not it's not premeditated, but that's the kind of way we play. It's just a sloppy, you know. And John, he just didn't get it, you know. John Cale didn't get it really until the end, which is a shame, really. But he kind of got us at the end, but it was too late, and he kind of knew that. And we kind of only really got on with him the last couple of days, and he did. And I think we both accepted that it was too late. But you know,
so you re-recorded several songs again. Do those original tapes exist of the first lot?
I don't know. You know what? I've got a reel-to-reel at home that I found in the attic that Tony Wilson gave me once when he was clearing out the Hacienda. And that might be the original one. That's a good point. I've never tried converting. That's a good point. I should check that out.
Ooh,
maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah. Make sure you get that tape in the hands of someone to preserve it because it could be falling apart.
Yeah, well, funny enough, one of our roadies was telling me recently that you have to do something. He was telling me what you have to do to keep it. Yeah, I don't understand.
Bake it. Yeah. Anyway,
that's what
that's
interesting. Yeah, it was all that. Yeah.
Yeah. So the album Squirrel and G-Man, I'm not going to say the whole thing. I mean, it's a long title. What an album title. Were there other titles being considered?
Well, there was a combination of all the titles that are being considered. We had like 5, and as usual, the band, we couldn't agree, and we was fighting and arguing. So someone just said, well, let's just have all the titles in one. So it's about... Yeah, so someone wanted to call it Squirrel G-Man, someone wanted to call it 24-hour Party People, someone wanted to call it Plastic Face Cat Smile, someone wanted to call it White House. So it was just like, oh, let's just put it together. That was it, yeah.
Okay. Now, as I understand, the original pressing of that album, and that's we get into some of the nerdy stuff here, so hopefully...
No, that's good. That's good. Yeah.
The original pressing of the album had a track, Desmond, which I think was removed because it closely resembled Obla Di Obla Da. What are your memories of that?
It didn't closely resemble it. Was it? You know, Desmond. We used to do that a lot live, kind of outdoors. So we thought it was okay to do it in the studio. Ironically, it's probably the only Beatles song I don't like. The only one that, you know. And then I didn't realize till years later it was replaced. I didn't realize that's the original copy. Yeah.
Okay, so, you don't remember because apparently Michael Jackson owned the publishing on the Beatles, so it was his lawyers that essentially got involved. So you don't remember that kerfuffle at all. Vaguely,
I remember it vaguely, but we didn't really tell me. You sort that out. We're not interested, whatever. We have to take it off the album. Okay, we were never very precious about stuff.
So the album, from what I understand, at the time it performed below expectations. So was it a surprise that Tony, still had energy for the band and you got a second shot at it?
Well, what happened was we did 24-Hour Pipe. It was a single and the video, and that got lots of interest. And the club, you could see the growing thing, live we were growing an audience. So I think that I don't think he cared about sales. It was factory records as well. So he believed in it. It was Tony really that believed in us.
Right. Okay. And was Bez part of the live show at this point?
I think he just become part of the live show. Probably was on the first album. Yeah, he came down.
Okay.
Yeah, he was on the first album. Yeah. He was. Yeah.
How did he go from stage dancer to permanent member of the band?
He's still not a permanent member of the band. I don't know what happened. No, he is. I don't. It just happened. There was no one ever. It just happened.
He just never left.
He just jumped up, and lots of people had done it before him. That jumped up and danced. Lots of our friends, but he was just so different than everybody. And he was just like, you could see everyone just focused on him. He was, so we convinced him to carry. I think he did it after that and then he didn't for a few gigs, and we were like, oh, it's not the same. So I think he got back, and that's it.
Right. What does he do at band? Does he come to band rehearsal? Does he?
He used to come to rehearsals when we were writing, and he's got a good knowledge of music. So he used to be like, he used to say, oh, I like that. And he used to call himself he's a bit of a taste master. So yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right. So Bummed, when you started recording Bummed, that was being produced by Martin Hannett, which I imagine was a very different experience than you had with John Cale, yeah?
It was great with Martin. He hadn't worked with Factory for about 5 years. He was in recovery from alcohol and drugs. We picked him up, me and Paul Ryder, the first day. We got on with him. We arrived in this town, small market town in northeast England. And during those times, whatever year it was, 88, I think, pubs weren't open all day. They closed at 2:00 in the afternoon and opened again at, I think, 5:36 at night. We got there at 3 in the afternoon and the pubs were open. And we got to the studio, which is called the Slaughterhouse, an ex-Slaughterhouse, next door to a pub. And we go in, just been brand new with the first band in. So the studio owner said, "Do you want to have a look round?" And we were like, yeah, okay. Well, how come the pubs are open? He said, "It's market day, they're open all day." We went, "Okay, we'll just go there." He said, "Do you want to have a look around the studio?" Martin, do you? And he went, "No, we'll go to the pub." I went to the pub, we ordered 2 beers and a Coke for Martin. And Martin said, "Go on, I'll have a beer then." 12 hours later, we were still in there, and that was it,
There's the story of him taking Joy Division under his wing because they really didn't put up much of a fight. They just kind of let him do what he did. Did he have a similar relationship with Happy Mondays?
Me and Paul Ryder got on with him really, really well. Really well. He became a friend. He was great. I loved him. I always thought him as kind of like the kind of English version of Phil Spector.
Phil Spector, yeah.
As mad,
without the gun.
Well, yeah, no, I don't know about the gun stuff, but in the studio, he was mad. He was eccentric, but he was brilliant. Funny, when we first got to the studio, he was a young guy, and studios had changed in the 4 years. Martin hadn't produced anything. There was semi-digital, and there was lots of stuff going on. And the young engineer was some, hotshot, and he was like, after the first day, said to me, "Paul, I don't think he can cut it. Things have changed last 4 years. He doesn't know his ways around the studio. I don't think he can cut it." And by about 6-7 days in, the guy said to us, "He's a bit of a genius." Yeah, I love him. So his opinion changed him, but I loved him. He was great.
Like, what kind of guidance or what kind of wisdom did he teach a young Happy Mondays?
He used to just laugh. He did nothing. He just said, he always do the unexpected, do something different. Always try to do something different. And he listened to every member of the band, and he was like, "I like the idea of it." He said, "You're all different characters, but you all got the same ideas, but sometimes you argue." And he would say, because we always argue about everything, he'd say, "No, we're doing it that way. We're doing it this way." I remember once he used to put 2 microphones together with a smoke dimp of a cigarette filter in between the middle. And he smoked Marlboro, and I remember I was smoking Marlboro Lights, or Camel Lights at the time, Marlboro Lights. And they offered him one of them. He went, "No, it doesn't work with the lights. That's with the full strength ones." He believed he was not, but it was kind of hard to say. He was proper old fashioned. We worked really long hours and into the night, and he was convinced that working between midnight and 5 in, you got a better sound in the studio because there was less of an electromagnetic field, less planes flying over, less households, and you got more. And since that's been proved, at the time we thought he was insane. Since it's been proven, studios have said that it's the best time to record.
Wow. Okay, I didn't realize that. That's interesting. Okay, so with Martin Hannett producing the record, this is also the Happy Mondays were having a lot of adventures of their own. As I understand, a lot of the band was financing themselves by selling ecstasy pills. Is that your memory as well?
Yeah. So we did have a lot of ecstasy pills there, but no, we were never, we were musicians, But that was a party time, that Bummed album. We had a back room, and it just had a cassette player, what do you call them, boombox things, and it had the house music 24 hours a day. But the studio was different. But we wasn't trying to copy that music; it was just influence us. And it was a party. People coming up from that. It was a 4-hour drive from Manchester, coming up, and we'd go down to the Hacienda and drive back up because the all-night sessions. And it was a house party. It was an ecstasy-fueled album. Ironically, even though it doesn't sound it. That was a kind of
the spirit in which it was born.
Spirit, yeah, but we weren't trying to copy that kind of music. That was just the spirit of it.
Right. Now, the design of Factory Records, they have this very industrial aesthetic in much of their early catalog, but when it comes to Happy Mondays, it seems to have shifted quite colorfully. Do you recall that sort of conversation around that, or was that a deliberate shift? Do you know?
Nothing is deliberate with us. Nothing, and seriously, nothing ever happens. Nothing is premeditated, nothing is deliberate. And it was the cousin of Paul and Sean, Matt Pat a design. They were artists, design still are, and they're great. They've done lots of stuff. They're brilliant. When they did the first one, the first EP, And I remember it was a soft, and we were like, great, because everything in the factory was symmetrical, and this was the opposite. And we did, and that's what Tony Wilson liked about us. We were opposite, and we didn't. Well, like I say, it wasn't premeditated. It was just and it was and I think maybe I've said that wasn't conscious effort by then, because their artwork is very colourful like that. Yeah.
It always seemed to me it stuck out as visually very different than the rest of the Factory Records catalog.
And I presume you're a huge vinyl collector.
Yeah, plenty of it.
I've got. Do you know the Northern Soul story, where the name come from? That's just digressing.
Tell me about it.
So the Northern Soul was basically a Northern English thing. Usually around. It started in Manchester at a place called the Twisted Wheel and the Magic Village, 2 clubs, and then they closed down, and then it went to Wigan and Blackpool. There were satellite towns outside of Manchester, 20, 30 miles respectively. Mm-hmm. But it became the big thing in the early 70s, mid 70s, before my time. But I remember the Northern Soul kids. And what happened was when soccer teams, football teams from Manchester, Man United or Man City, Man United would go down to London for the games, the fans would go to Soho in London to these 2 rare record stores, especially one, looking for Rare 45. So the guy'd have stacked up all these rares that were never released on Motown, Stax, whatever. And they would go through them, but because they were going to the football game, they never had time to buy enough. So they went. So it was a guy from London, ironically, the record store owner. When the Manchester United were playing in London, he put a box of all these 45s underneath, and he wrote on it Northern Soul. So the football fans would go for all these rarities. That's where the name came from. So it came from a London, ironically, a Southerner.
Oh, so are you do you have a record collection? Do you spin vinyl still?
I do so much. No, Paul Ryder, the big one. I used to have, and I love vinyl, because I live between 2 countries. I'm moving back to the UK next year. That's the plan. I'm going to get a full old system, one that I always wanted in this. I always wanted a Bang & Olufsen in the 70s. It's typical. There was one I can't remember. I'm going to get it. I just love vinyl. I prefer everything about vinyl. Everything.
Yeah. And when you're releasing those records, that was kind of the CD era. So you didn't get as many of the records on the full vinyl. Just before the CD era, really. And I remember Factory used to get the vinyl from Eastern Europe somewhere. I'm not even sure where it was. So it was always really heavy, really bad quality. The vinyl was really heavy. It was like thick. It was like that thick, Mm-hmm. Really, really bad quality. So, Yes Please is an album a lot of people cite as the final nail in the coffin for Factory Records. Often said it's the album that bankrupted Factory Records, but I don't think they really needed your help to do that.
It's a complete fabrication. Quite the opposite. When Factory went under, they owed us a lot of money, and a lot of money. I mean, money that would set us up for life. They owed us a lot, and we didn't get it. We had to go to Barbados because we wasn't ready to release the album. New Order hadn't. I think so. Just the timing was bad they'd signed loads of bands. So New Order, and we were funded. Certainly, New Order were funding the Hacienda and lots of stuff. We were funding some bands. So someone had to make a record. We only had 5 songs. We weren't ready. New Order certainly weren't. I think they just released and were on a world tour because their success in the States, they had an extended US tour in the world. So that got pulled back. So everything, it was all timing. Didn't cost that much to do Barbados. It was cost no more than it would have done in England. It was cheap because you couldn't get the equipment. The studio wasn't that expensive. So that it didn't. It was a complete myth. Quite the opposite. But it's one that continues. Like Tony, don't get a myth get in the way of a good story. The truth gets a good story. Yeah, so that's not true at all. No.
After the breakup of Happy Mondays, were you ever approached to join Black Grape, or were there any other configurations of Happy Mondays before Uncle Dysfunctional?
No, we just did. No, we got the Mondays back together. Me, Sean, and Bez, and then me and Sean did Uncle Dysfunctional. But I didn't like I thought it was a great album, but we argued, me and Sean, after it. I did the music mostly, and Sean did the lyrics, which he does. I did the music with a couple of the producers, and then when it comes to the mix, there was a disagreement. I thought Sean wanted it really lo-fi, which it ended up being. And I wanted it big sounding. I liked the idea of lo-fi, but I thought the next record should be the lo-fi one. Go with the big, then go with the small, And we fell out, and I didn't get involved in the mix, and a lot of my stuff got cut and out, so we fell out over that. But he got a lot of good. You know, it wasn't really a Mondays album. It was kind of more of a me and Sean arguing, compromising album.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think there's ever going to be another Happy Mondays album?
Without Paul, I don't think so. I don't think so. This talk, but I don't think so. You know what? I don't think it's an age thing. Cause I think, you know, some like Bob Dylan, Johnny Cash, you know, lots of people, Leonard Cohen, who's my hero. Lots of people can make great records when you're older. There's no doubt about that. But you've got to be in the right place, and you've all got to be in the right place as a band. And I'm not for sure we're there yet to do that. Maybe I don't know, but I'm not at that.
Maybe he could take some of his demos and do a Free as a Bird type. Do
you know what we did? I've got some demos really funny. I've got my solo stuff. I've got a song. My next song I'm coming out. I've just finished this week. It's called The Ballad of David Bowie. I don't want to talk about that, but when we was looking at the tracks, there's 2 bass lines on it, and the intro bass line, it's got Paul Ryder bass. And I got to the producer and said, Paul Ryder, I don't remember. He went, yeah, when you first did it, you asked him to play the bass line, and he did a bit, and that's what you've kept part of it. And I went, I didn't realise that. I didn't know that. I've forgotten. So that's a good.
Do you know if all the Mondays tapes exist? If anything was destroyed, do you know if they exist in physical form somewhere?
No, a lot of them got destroyed through away when Hacienda went under in factory. Paul Ryder has a lot of stuff though. I've got a couple of, like I say, reels, but not many. So yeah, I don't know. Someone might have them somewhere.
Oh, so you think the multi-tracks and some of the masters may have been destroyed in the Hacienda somehow?
Well, because upstairs from the Hacienda was a storage place, and I had another band I used to raise, and then Tony gave me a couple of them. And then a lot of it got thrown into dumpsters, skip dumpsters, and so. But this might be a few. I think I've got 2 or 3. I've got Squirrel G-Man, 24-hour party people sessions. I think by Tony just giving me, said they got it thrown in the bin. I said, just give me 3 of them. Don't give me any more. I should have taken the lot, shouldn't I? Really. Yeah. I only realised my mum was just moving house recently, about 2 months ago, and she found him in the attic.
Wow, Gaz, you got to get them looked after. That's historical.
I know, I should get them sorted out, yeah.
All right, Gaz, well, make sure you look after them tapes, and we look forward to seeing you here in Australia. Again, everyone, Happy Mondays 2023, 24-hour Party People Greatest Hits Tour in October. It's New Zealand, it's Australia, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Fremantle. You can get those dates up at destroyalllines.com. And we really look forward to seeing you down here. And Gaz, thank you so much for jumping on and talking records and music and all sorts of good stuff.
Yeah, what kind of weather can I expect in October? When I lived there, I can't remember because Western Australia was a bit different. Will it be warming up or? It'll
be fine. It'll be good. It'll be. It's starting to warm up now. It's spring. By the time it's October, it should be hot. We're expecting a very hot summer. So yeah, bring your board shorts.
You don't want to see these legs, right? Okay, I will do. Right, okay.
Oh, there we are, man. Such a charming dude, Mr. Gaz Whelan of the Happy Mondays. Don't forget the 24-hour Party People Greatest Hits Tour is coming to Australia and New Zealand. The latter half of October, destroyalllines.com is where you could get tickets and more details. Oh, and don't forget there's an extended version of this interview only available to show patrons at patreon.com/Vinyl Guide. And that's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please share these episodes on your social media. Put them on Facebook, tweet them out on Twitter or X or whatever it is. Share them in the Facebook groups or the Reddit threads or whatever those are. Or even show your record nerd friends how to get a podcast on their smartphone. They'll appreciate it, and I certainly will as well. And we'll be back shortly with a brand new episode. So until we talk next time, get out there and buy some records, people. Cheers.
That's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Send your thoughts to Nate at thevinylguide.com or follow or tag us on Instagram at Vinyl Guide. Until next time, keep spinning.